This episode is brought to you by Cradlepoint. To hear their thoughts on why IT decision makers should incorporate wireless WAN and 5G in their plans now, stay tuned at the end of this episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the IT News podcast. On the show this week, we're talking to Mick Spence. He's the Data and Insights Lead for Transurban's Victorian Business. Now they're doing some really interesting things with data around road safety and traffic flow optimization. We talk about a number of examples, but they're also doing a lot of work with digital twins, particularly around road tunnel ventilation and also around driver behaviour, with a view to understanding the causes and testing mitigations for congestion. Now, personally, I found this really fascinating. I love data, and so it was really energising for me to explore Transurban's story and projects. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
I feel like most people already know Transurban. You're obviously one of the largest toll road builders and operators in the world. I just wondered, maybe, can you give us a broad sense of the technology operations for Transurban, and particularly the area that you sit in?
Just to be clear for everyone, so Transurban is a top 15 ASX company, and I'm not sure, I guess for some context, that we operate, as you said, lots of toll roads. I think it's around 17 in Australia, but we also operate toll roads in the US and in Canada, and a lot of people don't realise that Transurban is an international company. So there's around 2,000 employees, or a little over, at Transurban, and interestingly, about 40% of them actually work in technology. So in some sense, we're almost partially a tech company. So from a data and analytics perspective, Transurban itself is largely an Amazon shop, so we tend to use a lot of the Amazon tools. And our data platform is an Amazon Redshift database, our main analytics platform. And we use Tableau over the top of that as our visualization, reporting, analytics tool. And that's been super successful for us at Transurban. So I introduced Tableau, I think about 5.5 years ago when I started there. And since then, it's basically just continually grown organically to be the self-service tool for the organisation.
Can you maybe step back to that 5 years ago when you joined the organisation and what the analytics environment looked like at that point?
Yeah, so it was before I started. I actually started as a consultant at Transurban at the end of a project building the foundation of the analytics platform. And so prior to this analytics platform starting, it was probably stereotypically like a lot of other organisations, we're using Excel. So we have a lot of siloed systems which are built for the purpose of performing HR activities or performing tolling activities or CRM type of activities. And they're great at that, but there was no solution at all to put all of that data together to get the valuable insights. So a project pre-me started, and it had some limited success, wasn't perfect. And at the end of that project, and as I said, I came in from an analysis side, a more business-facing side, and as I said, I introduced Tableau to the organisation. The board basically saw some value in what we were doing and decided to keep on only 2 people once the project finished. And these 2 people was a data engineer and myself, so we became permanent employees to continue to grow and evolve the analytics practice. And so for the next 3 years beyond that, our data engineer spent his life basically ingesting more and more data, and I spent my life analysing that data, getting in the face of business, identifying those subject matter experts, identifying those tech-savvy people in our business units, and basically putting tools like Tableau in the hands of them and teaching them the capabilities and how to get insights out of our vast amount of data. So for the next 3 years, that's what we spent doing. And now the team has grown a little bit more. It's still pretty lean. But for an organisation the size of Transurban, I've got 200, which is 10% of the organisation, have a Tableau desktop licence, for example. So that means 10% of the organisation are analysts. They're mining through our data and getting insights out. And I have around 900 active consumers of data through our Tableau server environment. So nearly half the organisation are actively using dashboards, reports, or something that's been built in Tableau and getting insights out of that. So that's where we are now. So in 5 years, I always tell people that we've had enterprise adoption of data and analytics at Transurban.
So some of the use cases you mentioned there are reasonably internal or internal facing, but I know from the past history of some of the stuff you've previously mentioned around Tableau, a lot of it's external facing as well, and particularly around the road project. Do you want to give us a sense of how Transurban makes use of the data it has?
Yeah, so most of our analysis is around either road safety or optimising traffic flow. I could talk for hours on some of the examples. And the good thing about Transurban is that they resonate with the everyday person because everyone drives a car. An example of one of the more recent analytics projects we delivered is for those that live in Victoria, basically the founding road of Transurban was the Burnley Tunnel and the Domain Tunnel. So particularly the Burnley Tunnel, it goes down a hill and then at 2/3 of the way through the tunnel, it's quite steep. It turns and comes back up. The challenge we have, a problem we have is that cars are going fine down the hill, but as soon as they hit the steep bit going up, they're slow to get back on the accelerator to accelerate out. And that builds up congestion. It sounds like a strange problem to solve. We want cars to go faster. And this was a really interesting, we built a digital twin effectively of the Burnley Tunnel. We built a virtual reality model of the tunnel and we employed people to sit in a virtual reality rig and drive through that tunnel unaltered. So as it is now, and it was amazingly how scary accurate it was, this tunnel. And while these people were sitting in the virtual reality rig, we had them hooked up to biometric devices. So we're taking blood pressure and heart rate and things like that. And so they drive through the virtual tunnel as it is now. We'd interview them, we'd ask them questions, and then we'd change the virtual reality model to be an enhanced model. And we had a library of enhancements we could make. And the best thing about this is if some of them didn't work, and this is where Tableau was useful and getting quick insights was important. If some of those enhancements didn't work, we could tweak different things and try something else. So we made virtual changes to that tunnel. An example of one of the changes, we have these what are called pacing lights. So lights that literally on the side of the tunnel that go at the speed limit. And the perception is, the feel is while you're driving, you kind of feel as though you have to keep up with those lights. And so if we keep those lights at the speed limit, people don't like those lights going faster than them. So they tried to keep up and maintain a consistent speed. So we did this and it was really interesting. We got a whole bunch of really cool data. But what I really love about analytics as opposed to just sort of building standard reports and dashboards is we got insights out of that we hadn't planned. So it's almost we were getting answers to questions we hadn't thought of, as opposed to like a report or a dashboard where you're answering a known question. So an example of that is the focal distance of these people driving in the virtual reality rig was more than 10 metres. So on average, people were sort of focusing around 30 metres ahead of them. In the enhanced environment, they were focusing 43 metres ahead of them, and that's a big safety measure. So the further ahead you look, the more aware you are of what's going on ahead, the more easily you can react to changes ahead. So that was a good insight. And so cars did drive faster, slightly faster, and it's still at the speed limit, which was great, but we got other safety benefits out of that as well. So that's a good example of our use of data and our use of Tableau and some of the newer technologies, the digital twin type of technologies.
I imagine that there would be a lot of camera systems within toll roads and particularly within the tunnel environment for safety and monitoring as well. Were you able to do analytics on the footage that's taken as well and match between what the experience that you saw within the virtual reality environments, or were you able to use that particular data at all?
We didn't for that scenario, but we do. It's something we're dabbling in a little bit more now than we used to. So video analytics we're using for other use cases, not necessarily for that Burnley Tunnel use case, but we're looking at using video analytics to track what we call lane closure or Red X compliance, which is it's kind of a relatively new introduction to roads. Is you have a gantry above the road and you might have a speed limit per lane, but you might have a Red X, a closed lane. We do a lot of analysis on how compliant are people to those closed lanes. And we can do that by looking at sensors in roads and things like that. But it's kind of challenging. It's complex data and lots of it. But we can also use what we call our AIDs, which are automatic incident detectors, our cameras that are purpose-built to detect incidents. We can do video analytics on those and count cars and the types of cars that are driving through closed lanes. And this is not for enforcement or anything like that. This is more from a safety perspective from our own staff and for our customers driving on our roads. We try to work on strategies. How many gantries before an incident should we be closing that lane to ensure that people have enough time to move out of those dangerous lanes? So we're looking at using cameras or video analytics for that sort of thing. As I said, we do a lot of analytics for automatic incident detectors. So these cameras are smart enough to detect whether a vehicle is stopped on the side of the road or those sorts of things that allow us to quickly react and close lanes and make the road safe for people.
Just stepping back a little bit, you mentioned before that you're mostly an AWS environment with the Tableau overlay. Maybe if you can give us a little bit of a sense of what that environment looks like, and also maybe the other area we've touched on is data ingestion. It'd be useful to understand a little bit more about where you're sourcing data and what you're ingesting into that environment.
So as I mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of siloed systems. So some of the systems that are unique to Transurban are our tolling systems. We also have sensors in our roads. So every sort of 500 metres in every lane, we have a sensor. So you can imagine how much data this generates. And those sensors, they count cars and they also give us average speeds over 30-second periods and things like that. So on all of our roads, we've got lots of data we're collecting. And that's why I always say the value of analytics is when you can put all of these data sets, all of these silos together. So we run S3 as our data lake. So we ingest or we grab all of these files in near real time is sort of our going in principle into our S3 buckets. And then we ingest, we've got a Python integration server. So handcrafted Python libraries essentially that ingest all of this operational raw data into our Amazon Redshift database. So as I said, our database sort of in near real time is getting live traffic information. We also have weather data from the Bureau of Meteorology because that influences things. We have what's called an OMCS system, which is an operational management control system, which is all around how hard our fans are going within the tunnel, what the emissions levels are, what every speed sign is saying at a point in time. So we collect all of this data in near real time, and then we build effectively Tableau solutions straight over the top of that. It's a pretty big database and lots of cool data. So prior to the analytics platform, you can imagine with all of these sensors in our roads, without having a big data type of platform and some cool tech to use that data, we could get like half a day's worth of transactions into Excel, and that's how you'd know what congestion was like on a particular section of road. So it was a pretty easy business case, pretty easy to wow people effectively when you can ingest all of this, we're talking billions and billions of rows of data into a platform, throw Tableau over the top, and I can give you year-on-year trends on traffic congestion on this particular section of road. And our traffic modelers are going, wow, this is awesome. So yeah, that's where we evolved.
So it sounds like you're using a lot of event streaming to get stuff from near real time from the road environments back to the central point.
Yep.
Is there any sort of future use case around potentially taking more of that processing to the edge, or is it still mostly a centralized operation that will take you through to the future?
There is. So we're looking at a lot of that video analytics I was talking about. We're looking at putting a lot of that on the edge. So you're right. At the moment, it is certainly centralized. And a lot of our analytics is retrospective. We're not using our system for too much real-time reporting, but our principle is to try and capture our data as much real-time. Where we're heading is things like, particularly from a safety perspective, we're looking at using our sensors on our roads. So if we can detect congestion building on a section of road, and we actually do this now, we then immediately inform our OMCS system, our operational management control system, to project signage, messages up on our roads and our variable messaging signs to warn people in advance that there's congestion building ahead. And we're doing that in near real time. So our systems are all talking to each other very quickly. Disparate systems, different silos are talking to each other to inform our drivers if there's danger ahead and things like that. And that's all happening automatically. And that's something relatively new we've implemented rather than a human being actually looking at data, understanding, oh, it looks like it's congestion's building up. Maybe I'll put a message up for people to warn them. This all happens now instantaneously, which is kind of cool.
So you mentioned some user numbers before. I think you mentioned 200 Tableau users directly, analyst users, and about 900 odd consumers of the data. Can you talk a little bit about how the organisation is using it, but more to the point how Transurban approached data literacy with so many users and consumers of data?
Yeah, so as I said, 200 analysts. So a Tableau desktop user, sort of their primary role is to analyse data, which is kind of cool. I still think we're probably err on too much of report writers and dashboard builders, which again are good. Management do certainly need answers to known questions, but we're trying to encourage people to be more analysts. And I guess it's where Tableau are going with. So that's why I like where Tableau's direction particularly is in that they're adding more and more features that encourage people to be analysts, not just report writers. So a lot of the new features they're adding aren't necessarily to make a report look prettier or anything like that. They're actually encouraging our analysts to actually analyse data and, as I said, be inquisitive and find answers to questions they hadn't thought of. So we are still building lots of dashboards and reports, and we build a lot of self-service solutions as well to allow users to explore data a little bit, trying to push that a little bit more. But a lot of our consumers, as I said, I've got about 900 consumers that are active consumers. More than 3/4 of the organisation have access to Tableau content. And a lot of those users are opening up a standard report. So our executive committee, almost on a daily basis, are looking at traffic volumes compared to budget and forecast and things like that. So that's sort of standard stuff that's built. And we're now building dashboards that sit inside our control room that are updated in near real time that can talk to people about how many incidents there are, and what's our clearance time on our roads today compared to our targets and things like that. So there's a lot of that information. A lot of KPI-driven reporting and dashboarding. But as I said, I'm trying to encourage our business, and we're getting there, to do more analysis, not necessarily just use our tools for reporting and dashboarding. We're actually undertaking at the moment a data literacy program. We're just starting, where we are educating people on more techniques around using data. I run a community of practice for Tableau, and part of that, so every 6 weeks, I sort of grab most of those 200 people together, and we talk about different techniques, talk about different features of the tool. I always get someone within one of the business units to showcase something that they've built. So it's built a really good community of analysts, and not just the product Tableau, but just the whole art of being an analyst.
I was reading, and I don't know how current this is, but it looked like you had quite a potentially interesting structure with analytics in terms of having an kind of a help desk-like service in the form of Interworks for the Tableau environment. I don't know how current that is.
Yeah, no, that's current. So
it is?
Yeah, what we do, so from an organisation structure first, we're trying to promote a hub and spoke type of model within Transurban, whereas the hub is within technology. In my team, we're the centre of excellence, and we have a team that are experts in the tools and the data. But the spokes are each of our business units. So we're encouraging our spokes, each business unit, to build their own little ecosystem of analysts, if you like. And they can always come back to the hub for advice and things like that. But our job is to work with each of those spokes, each of those different business units, to encourage them to use best practice data analytics. What we do is Transurban made a conscious decision to not support the back end, the Tableau server, the infrastructure side of the software, if you like. So we outsource that to Interworks, and they're doing a fantastic job. They not only sort of support the back end and keep the server going, they're experts in Tableau, the front end tool. So I use them we run training sessions every few months. We run lunch and learn sessions every month, and Interworks essentially help me drive that. So they've been prolific in helping me grow the Tableau community and the analytics community at Transurban.
You mentioned, I think, before that you run fairly lean, or you're very lean at the start and still fairly lean.
Yep.
And so when you have that kind of lean operation, I think, and you've seen it in the past in organizations that have embraced data analytics in a big way, that the hub can tend to be overworked or really taxed in terms of once it starts to take off, a lot of pressure starts to come in and to help out on different projects that are happening within these spokes of the business. It seems like that kind of model would be quite helpful in terms of assisting that along with the drive to self-service.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why we sort of almost we were forced to almost create a hub and spoke, because we were so lean, the hub, there's no way we could support all of the work. And I believe, I always say that Tableau is like Excel, if you like. Tableau is not a tool for technology people. It's a tool for everyone, just like Excel is a tool for everyone. So I was always quite big on putting the tool in the hands of the people that know their business better than I do. It's just a matter of educating them. And it's not that hard, I don't think, to find. As I said, every business unit has those tech-savvy people, the people that love using Excel and writing macros in them, and they do all that sort of stuff. They're the people you cling to. They're inquisitive people. They like data. So it's just a matter of putting different tools in their hands and taking them on the journey and training them up, because I couldn't do it all myself, essentially. So I had to do it, and it's worked well.
How do you see the use of Tableau continuing to evolve in the organisation, and how does that sort of play into future plans around analytics, for example?
Yeah, so I expect it's still organically growing in terms of just normal usage, but Tableau, as I said before, introducing more and more analytical features rather than just the report writing features. And we're using a product called Tableau Data Prep, which is a data preparation tool. And we're using that more and more. So it's sort of like last mile effort prior to, you prepare your data right at the last minute before you report it. And so that's what sort of Tableau Data Prep is. And so we're rolling that out more and more at the moment. There's more and more business units that are becoming reliant on that tool, and that requires a little bit more tech-savvy people. But I think essentially our goal is, again, to get people to do more analysis and use the tool, because Tableau is an analytics tool. I mean, it's great at building reports and dashboards, but its primary purpose is to do analysis. And what it allows you to do is fail fast. You can explore data, and if there's nothing interesting there, that's okay. That's knowledge, that's insight. Let's go somewhere else. And I want people to start doing that a little bit more. So as I said, we're running lots of training programs at the moment to make people more data literate, and we're getting it. It's good.
And just to cycle back to something we talked about at the top of the conversation when we were talking about the Burnley Tunnel and the digital twin of that environment, how do you see potentially digital twins evolving within the Transurban business? Obviously, Transurban's been talking about it for quite a long time, has been in the space for quite a long time, but as you look at construction projects, for example, and commercial building projects, for example, there's talk of having a digital twin for each basically construction project. Would there be a time where Transurban perhaps would have a digital twin for every road asset?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're doing that at the moment. For Airport Link Tunnel, Queensland, we've built a digital twin for basically the problem we were trying to solve or we're looking at is the ventilation system and trying to optimise our electricity consumption by tweaking settings in our ventilation system so to use less power but still maintain EPA limits of carbon monoxide within the tunnel. So we have built a digital twin and we have already seen real benefits in digitally tweaking system settings of our ventilation system. And so good for the environment because we're using less electricity, good for our cost base. And the plan is we're basically rolling out that model to most of our other tunnels, particularly because we can see so much benefit in it. And I think our plan is for every new tunnel or asset we build, we want to do the same thing. But at the moment, we're sort of targeting some of our highly expensive assets where we're using a lot of electricity to tweak the systems there. And it's exciting, I reckon, this area.
Yeah, absolutely. And just final question I've been asking everyone, what excites you about the next 12 months?
I think the last 18 months has highlighted how important data is. Like as a bit of a data nerd, I think people's eyes now are so open as to how important data is. And so I think the data space will go ballistic over the next 12 months. And as I said, for Transurban, we've got so much data and we have really good people that are really inquisitive. And so just taking people more on the journey and getting them to explore and analyse all of our data over the next 12 months, it's an exciting place. When you've got people that are interested in data and interested in getting value out of it and insights out of it, it's a good place for a data person like me to be. And that's what made my job really easy in a sense.
Hi, I'm William Marr, Commercial Editor at IT News. One of the technologies with significant potential to benefit businesses is 5G. But what are the practical use cases? And why would IT decision makers incorporate 5G in their plans now? To explore this, we asked Nathan McGregor, Senior Vice President Sales in the Asia Pacific region for Cradlepoint. Nathan, most listeners are probably familiar with advertisements about 5G aimed at consumers, but why do you say IT decision makers should be taking a closer look at wireless WAN and 5G now?
When you watch the television at the moment, you're definitely bombarded with 5G from most of the service providers in our market. And yes, you'd be okay to think that that's all about the consumer. It's all about the latest phone that will get you a faster way to get a retail outcome. But there's a whole thing that's moving along right now in terms of the enterprise use cases for wireless WAN and 5G as it's now presenting itself. But when you think about why a business might want to go down the pathway with 5G, it's those things that are around freedom. You know, they want to be able to be really agile and unencumbered. They want reach and flexibility of the networking. And when wireless, and we're there now, catching up with fixed speeds, then where's the barrier now for them to go and take their business onto the wireless network?
Some IT leaders may still see wireless as primarily a means to unchain devices from desks. Are they missing the bigger picture?
There's some really immediate reasons of why people are doing deployments right now on it. Some applications, though, like the Taylor Construction use case, which is a great customer of ours, where they needed to bring new technology into fairly tough environments. So they're building large construction sites and to do so wanted to incorporate cutting edge technologies like augmented reality capabilities. And to do that, they didn't have a lot of fixed opportunity to bring that data point in. So 5G was the only way for them to deliver that. And then there's the other things that are just here in IoT. Think about digital signage everywhere you go. Look at parking meters. Consider areas like sensors and temperature sensor data. All those things need to be brought back in as swiftly as possible, and 5G or wireless WAN provides that. Fleet management. There is so much now we've all been at home dialing up our Christmas presents this year. Everything's turning up through a delivery mechanism of some sort. So fleet management is a critical component of what's available now from wireless. And another area that's camera overlays, the security camera technology around digital is really going such an explosive use case now. But it's not always something that a financial institution, for instance, wants to put on their corporate network. So wireless provides a really simple way to get a separation capability between the existing corporate network and something like video camera security that want to pump it back into the cloud. So those are sort of some new, fairly sophisticated business models.
You say wireless WAN enables businesses to be more agile. Can you give us an example?
Aspen Medical's needed to provide support for general practitioner-led respiratory clinics and vaccination teams in aged care facilities. It was critically important during the pandemic. Traditional ways of doing it were not possible. You couldn't go and plan in with a telco carrier to get a fixed network connection that wasn't there previously, just so that you could provide a testing hub. They needed something that they could turn on without having that planning process. And that's how they do it with Cradlepoint routers, where they would turn up, be up and running within hours, managed through cloud-based management platform that gave them the ability to do zero-touch deployment. Literally anyone could turn up, plug that router in, it would connect to the network, download a configuration, and have them up and running in that time frame for them to be then delivering even patient records back in terms of the vaccinations that were being occurred. So those things are just never thought of or never considered to be possible without a wireless WAN capability.
Some listeners may be sceptical about the reliability of wireless. What do you say to that?
I think it was a 2020 research paper that was done by Nemetis, and the viability of wireless WAN for business was the title of it. But they found that using wireless WAN vastly improved reliability, as in compared to their fixed network, really, not just reliability compared to a mobile use case of your handheld phone. I would suggest to people to look a little bit deeper than what would appear on the surface. But it's really important to factor that in terms of the way we're connecting. And this is, I guess, where Cradlepoint really stands head above shoulders of everyone else in the 5G market. We build these things from the bottom up. This is our second generation of 5G, actually. No one else is at that point. We're first to market with it. We build them with such a robust way. Some of our ruggedized routers sit in dump trucks, mining vehicles. They're bounced around all over cities, all over the world, in ambulances and police cars, as well as the ones that are sitting there for branch connectivity. So there's elements to this. The network is really strong these days, but also your CPU and the way it's built, it does actually have an impact in terms of that overall quality. There's one last thing to mention here. So if we're all comfortable with that quality story, is that the way you then use that service model on your carrier network so that you are actually in a position where now with 5G, don't think of it in the same way as 4G. In a 5G world, you have an opportunity here with working with carriers to have dedicated service level agreements on that wireless carriage. We can nail up that circuit between your branch and the carrier's core network and nail it up and fully monitor that on SLAs, which were not possible in previous generations of mobile.
And what about the cost of wireless data?
But I recommend to people to look deeper into the cost and competitive benefit of using wireless instead of fixed. There are many people who would say at the moment that, okay, 5G will be fast, and yes, it'll be as fast as fixed, but that's too expensive to use, data caps and the like. Those things will change and are changing already, and we're seeing that in other parts of the world. We'll see the same thing here. But this cost competitive benefit is actually deeper than just what you pay on a per data carriage per month. The cost can actually be brought down dramatically by not having, depending on the business you're in, by not having outages. If you're in a retail sector and you can improve those reliability stats to 60, 80% better capability of SLA reliability on that branch, then you're going to be making more money. You're going to be making more sales and completing that outcome in your branch. But also competitive side, the new capability that it may bring for you. Those capabilities might be things like in the construction industry. It could be things in the transport industry. Those areas around new capability that wireless gives you that will never be available in fixed have a benefit to the business that needs to be presented in a business case. So look, in summary, the question around 5G for business, any network investment you're making now as a business, you really have to consider it to have a robust 5G wireless WAN strategy as a part of it. anything you're investing in now will absolutely hit that milestone of requiring 5G by the time the natural life cycle of that technology investment has been made.
That was Nathan McGregor, Senior Vice President Sales in the Asia Pacific region for Cradlepoint, talking about why IT decision makers should be taking a closer look at wireless WAN and 5G now. To learn more, head to cradlepoint.com/au.
And that's the podcast for this week. We'll be back with an exciting new interview next week. Until then, you can catch all the latest headlines in Australian IT over at itnews.com.au.